My parents went crazy when I bought a house for myself and not for my sister. I always knew my family had a favorite, and it wasn't me. My sister Emily was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, the one who had everything handed to her. Meanwhile, I was plan B, the backup, the one expected to be responsible, to fix things, to sacrifice. I went along with it for years, but one day I decided I'd had enough. Growing up, the pattern was obvious. Emily got the newest clothes, private tutors, and dream vacations. I got lectures about hard work and independence. At 16, I was flipping burgers at a grimy roadside restaurant while she was preparing for a summer trip to Europe. When I brought it up, my parents told me I needed to understand priorities. Translation: Emily's future mattered. Mine, not so much. I wasn't resentful, not at first. I just assumed that's how things worked. Parents invest in the kid they think will go far. The other one learns to survive. So I did. I worked through college. I lived in cramped apartments with roommates who forgot to pay rent. I skipped nights out while my classmates partied. I saved with every paycheck, not sure what for, just knowing I needed a safety net because if I fell, no one would catch me. After graduation, I had two choices: work hard in a low-paying job or take a risk. I used my savings to open a small auto repair shop. It wasn't glamorous. The first year was brutal. Long nights, endless hours, weekends covered in engine grease, but it paid off. By year 5, I had steady income, enough to start seriously thinking about buying a home. Of course, my parents knew. I'd mentioned my dream of owning instead of renting a tiny apartment. Every time I brought it up, they smiled, and somehow, the conversation always changed. You know how it goes. My mom would sigh dramatically. Emily's been going through a tough time. Rent's so expensive these days, my dad would add. She just needs a little help. It would mean so much if she had a stable place to live. They never said it outright, but the message was clear. I was supposed to fix their problems, even though Emily's struggles were mostly self-inflicted. While I was working 16-hour shifts, she was living her best life. Vacations, designer bags, nights out at expensive restaurants. But somehow, she was the one who needed help. Then there was the money. Over the years, I had been helping my parents financially, covering home repairs, unexpected bills, even giving them extra when things got tight. At first, I didn't mind. They were my parents, after all. But then I started noticing little things. My mom always had a new purse. My dad suddenly had a fancy watch. At first, I thought maybe they'd been saving. But then I realized where the money was going. Emily. My parents weren't struggling. They were just funneling my help straight into her lifestyle. Then I overheard a conversation that changed everything. I had stopped by my parents' house to drop something off. I wasn't planning to stay, but as I passed the kitchen, I heard my name. So, like any rational person, I froze, pretending to check my phone while I listened. "I'm sure he'll do the right thing," my mom said. "He's responsible. He's been saving for years," my dad agreed. "It makes sense. You can't expect her to struggle." Her struggle. Emily. The same Emily who had never paid a day of rent in her life, who still had our parents covering her credit card bills. Something wasn't right. And then it hit me. They were talking about my money. They had a plan where I, without being asked, would buy a house. Not for me, but for Emily. And the worst part, they just assumed I'd go along with it, like it was obvious, like it was my duty. I wanted to walk in and demand answers, but I knew how that would go. They'd say I was being selfish. They'd talk about family, about responsibility, about how lucky I was to have succeeded while Emily struggled. I'd heard it all before, so I left without saying a word. That night, I lay awake in my tiny studio apartment, staring at the ceiling while the kitchen light flickered, still unfixed. I thought about every time I'd been told to wait my turn, every sacrifice I'd made, every time I'd swallowed my frustration and smiled. And I thought about Emily. How would she react if she knew what they were planning? Would she be ashamed, grateful, or would she just assume it was her right? I got my answer the next morning. Emily called me out of the blue, voice full of excitement. She rambled on about a new house she'd found. "It's perfect," she gushed. 3 bedrooms, a backyard. I can finally move. I waited for the part that mattered, the part where she said she had a plan to pay for it. But she didn't, because she didn't need to. In her mind, this was already settled. My parents had made sure of it. She even had the audacity to say I could crash in the guest room if I ever needed a place to stay. That was it. The moment I knew I wasn't playing along anymore. The next day, I did exactly what they expected me to do. I bought a house. Only not the one they had in mind. I didn't tell anyone. No big announcements. No explanations. I found a place I loved, put down my deposit, and signed the papers. It wasn't huge, but it was mine. The first thing in my life that was truly mine. I thought I had time before my family found out. Maybe a few months, maybe even a year. But life has a funny way of speeding things up. I was in the middle of redoing the kitchen, peeling off those ridiculous live laugh love stickers the previous owner left, when my phone started blowing up. Missed calls, messages, my mom, my dad, Emily, even distant relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Then I saw the text that turned my stomach. "Why did we find out from the realtor that you bought a house?" I had no idea how they found out. Maybe the agent mentioned it to someone. Maybe Emily had been looking at the same properties. It didn't matter. What mattered was I had made my move. And now, the real battle was about to begin. The moment that text popped up on my screen, I knew my peaceful little housewarming phase was officially over. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Calls, messages, some angry, others concerned. But all of them carried the same underlying tone: betrayal. I ignored them. If I answered now, I'd be dragged into a conversation where they'd twist everything and make me out out to be the bad guy. Instead, I went back to fixing up my house. The previous owner had left some hideous wallpaper in the living room, and if I was going to deal with something stressful today, it would be that. Then the doorbell rang. I already knew who it was. I could feel it in my bones. When I opened the door, my parents were standing there, looking less like loving parents and more like corporate executives ready to discuss a breach of contract. My mom's face was a mix of disappointment and hurt, the kind of expression she reserved for when I forgot to call home. My dad had his arms crossed like he was about to negotiate a hostile takeover. Before they could even come in, I braced myself. The next 20 minutes went exactly as I expected. Accusations, guilt trips, the whole "we're family" speech. My mom talked about how Emily was heartbroken and didn't know where she was going to live now. My dad made it clear they had counted on me to do the right thing. And my favorite, the reminder of everything they had done for me. Everything they'd done for me? You mean making me pay rent as a teenager? Expecting me to fund my own education while they bought Emily designer wardrobes? Letting me work 2 jobs while she had weekend spa getaways? If anything, I'd pay them back tenfold. I could feel my patience wearing thin, but instead of snapping, I stayed quiet. I just nodded. I let them talk. I'd learned long ago that arguing never worked. They weren't here to listen. They were here to enforce their version of reality. Then came the ultimatum. My mom, voice calm but forced, said I had 2 options: transfer the house to Emily, or be cut off. I had to hold back a laugh. Cut off from what? Their love and support? The same love and support that always came with strings attached? I told them I'd think about it, not because I actually would, but because I wanted them out of my house. They left with a sense of victory, like they'd cornered me into submission. I took a deep breath, walked into the kitchen, and grabbed a beer from the fridge. Sat down, checked my phone, more missed calls. Emily had finally texted me, and I already knew what it would say. Something about how I'd ruined her life. Something about how she had counted on me. I opened it, and that's when I saw something that made my blood run cold. A message from Emily, but it wasn't meant for me. She had accidentally sent it to our family group chat instead of whoever she meant to send it to. It was a detailed plan. A literal step-by-step on how she and my parents were going to break me, how they'd keep up the pressure until I gave in and handed over the house. There it was, plain as day. Proof that this wasn't about family or fairness. It was a coordinated takedown, and I was just the idiot expected to roll over. I took a screenshot, saved it, sat there for a minute. For the first time in years, I felt something shift. It wasn't anger, it wasn't sadness, and it was clarity. They had never seen me as family, just a resource, something to be used when needed. So I made a decision. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to explain. I was going to show them exactly how done I was. The next morning, I woke up with a plan. If my family wanted a war, they'd get one, but on my terms. First, I secured my finances, changed all my passwords, checked all my bank accounts, and installed security cameras around the house. Knowing my family, I wouldn't put it past them to do something desperate. Then I contacted a lawyer. I didn't know if my parents could actually make legal trouble for me, but I wasn't taking chances. After explaining everything, my lawyer assured me that as long as the house was in my name and I hadn't signed anything for Emily, I had nothing to worry about. That was good news, but I still wasn't letting my guard down. Later that day, I got a text from Emily. "I'm willing to talk, but only if you're ready to make this right." I ignored it. A few hours later, another message, and this time from my mom. "I'm worried about you. I think we should have a family dinner to discuss everything." Yeah, right. I wasn't falling for that trap. Instead, I decided to flip the script. If they thought they could manipulate me through pressure, I'd apply some pressure of my own. First stop, social media. I made a simple post. Nothing dramatic, no direct call-outs, just a photo of me in front of my new house with a caption, "Finally home. Worked hard for this, and it's all mine." The reaction was immediate. Friends and family started commenting. Congratulations, praise, support. And then the real fun began. Emily didn't comment, but I knew she saw it. A few hours later, another text came through. This one wasn't so polite. She ranted about how selfish I was, how I humiliated her by making my purchase public. Apparently, some of her friends had asked why she wasn't buying a house if her brother could afford one. Her ego had taken a hit, and she didn't like it. Then came the call, this time from my dad. No more fake concern, no more "we're family" talk. He was angry. He said I was embarrassing them, that I was ungrateful. I let him rant, and when he was done, I gave him a simple response. Good. That's when the threat started. If you don't do the right thing, don't bother coming to our house again. My reply? Sounds like a win-win. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty for standing my ground. I didn't feel like I owed them anything, because the truth was I didn't. I blocked Emily, silenced my parents' calls. Then I ordered takeout from my favorite BBQ place, cracked open a cold beer, and sat on my new porch, watching the sunset over my hard-earned property. For the first time in my life, I was truly free. The silence didn't last long. The next morning, my inbox was flooded with even more messages. Emily had gone into full-blown panic mode. My parents had begun their version of damage control. Apparently, some extended family had seen my social media post and had started asking questions. The last thing my parents wanted was for people outside their tight circle to realize just how messed up the situation really was. I could practically hear their frantic conversations. My mom desperately trying to spin the narrative so she wouldn't look bad. My dad complaining about family duty and how I had betrayed them. Emily, well, she was unraveling. She wasn't just venting in the family group chat. She was also posting her grievances online. online. I checked her latest posts, long, dramatic captions about how hard her life was, how she'd been betrayed by the people closest to her, how she was struggling to find a place to live. I almost choked on my coffee when I saw what she had done next. She started a GoFundMe. Yes, a crowdfunding campaign titled, "Help Emily Get the Home She Deserves." The audacity was, honestly, impressive. The description was even better. She painted herself as the struggling sister whose heartless brother had refused to help her in her time of need. Conveniently, she left out the part where she expected a free house and had done absolutely nothing to earn it. Total raised $250, probably from a couple of equally entitled friends. I had to admit, I was a little disappointed. If you're going to run a scam, at least make it believable. But things were getting ridiculous, and I needed to shut it down before it spiraled further. I had no interest in starting a full-blown online family war, but I also wasn't about to let them drag my name through the mud. So I dropped one final bomb. I made one last post. This time, I included receipts, screenshots of the message Emily accidentally sent, the one detailing how she and my parents planned to break me and pressure me into handing over the house. I didn't add any commentary, just the screenshots and a short caption, just clearing up some misunderstandings. And that was all it took. The internet did the rest. Within hours, people started calling her out. Friends who had blindly supported her suddenly fell silent. Some even turned on her once they realized they'd been manipulated. Emily deleted the GoFundMe, then she deactivated her social media. My parents didn't fare much better. Apparently, a few of our extended relatives had reached out to them directly, asking, "Why are you trying to force your son to give away his house to your daughter?" And just like that, the family group chat went silent. No more guilt trips, no more passive-aggressive messages, just blessed, glorious silence. I leaned back in my chair and watched the sunset behind my home. My phone, finally quiet, a cold drink in my hand, my favorite playlist in the background, and for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't worried about what my family thought. I wasn't second-guessing myself. I had done what was right for me, and that was enough. The silence lasted a full week. No calls, no texts, no unexpected visits. I figured my parents might try one last desperate move, but for the first time, it seemed like they realized I wasn't going to cave. Maybe public shame finally hit them. Maybe they were regrouping. Either way, I wasn't letting my guard down. Then, just as I was starting to settle into my new life, came the next surprise. A certified letter. A thick envelope with my parents' return address. The kind that never contains anything good. I sat down at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee in one hand and a letter opener in the other, bracing myself. It was a legal notice. My parents were threatening to sue me. I had to read it twice to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. According to the letter, they claimed I had misled them, that I made them believe I was buying the house for the good of the family, and that I had unjustly enriched myself at their expense. It was absurd. I had never made a single promise to anyone about giving the house to Emily, but their desperation had clearly reached new heights. The best part? They were demanding financial compensation for the emotional distress I had caused Emily. Yes, she was apparently so emotionally distressed over not getting a free house that she and they believed I owed her money. I did what any rational person would do. I laughed. Then I called my lawyer. The conversation was short. He chuckled too and said, "They've got no case. At best, this is a scare tactic. At worst, a desperate last-ditch attempt to manipulate you." Either way, I wasn't worried. But I wasn't going to take it lightly either. If they wanted to escalate, then I would escalate back. I made a few calls, one to my bank to double-check all locks on my accounts, another to a locksmith to reinforce the security on my home. And then I did the one thing I knew would push them over the edge. I sent them a certified letter, informing them that any further harassment would result in legal action. 2 days later, the calls resumed. First my mom, then my dad, then Emily. I ignored all of them. They left voicemails, some apologetic, some still blaming me. The one from my mom was especially wild. She went from sobbing to yelling in a single message, demanding to know how I could turn my back on family over something as small as a house. The irony was rich. If it was so small, why were they willing to go to court over it? Finally, on the third day, I answered when my dad called. He skipped the pleasantries and went straight to the point. He said they'd drop everything if I just agreed to make things right with Emily. I told him there was nothing to make right. That was the final straw. He exploded, yelling about how selfish I was, how I'd betrayed them, how no child of his would treat family this way. It was a speech I'd heard a dozen times before, but this time, I felt nothing. I let him finish. Then I calmly said, "I have nothing else to say. I wish you well. I hope you move on." And I hung up, and that was it. The threats stopped. The guilt trips disappeared. They finally seemed to understand that I was done. Emily? She went completely silent, either because she realized she'd lost or because she found someone else to leech off. For the first time in my life, I felt free. No more manipulation, no more obligations, just me, my house, and a future that finally belonged to me.